Explain that to me. Take a moment, explain what you saw and what you were hearing.
Again, when we arrived in the hospital, the first thing, which I don't think has been mentioned, was that there was a lack of heat because there was no hot water to actually turn on and boil the things to make hot water and heat. Okay, so the issue there was, why wasn't there heat? And it's because of the plant infrastructure and the lack of maintenance there. As we further went into the hospital, we found that not only was there no heat going into the winter, but there was a lack of hygiene, soap, just, again, basic things that you would expect a 250-bed hospital. Of course, there was a 500-bed hospital, but it was mainly being used as 250 beds. But again, the lack of hygiene and soap. And then Ranking Member Tierney read a very good description of what I saw with the open vats of blood draining out of soldiers' wounds, the feces on the floor. The other thing that caught my attention was there were many family members taking care of their loved ones, not hospital staff, but family members. And this was obviously surprising to me to see a hospital where family members were actually emptying these vats of blood and other receptacles used to help the patients out, because they lack personnel in the hospital to do their jobs. So again, you had a very abusive and corrosive hospital in the Western world situation that was ongoing and getting worse. And that doesn't even go into the images that were previously portrayed on the TV of the human suffering, which, when you think about what we were trying to do in Afghanistan, which is build the Afghan Army and Police Corps and build that patronage of support within the Afghan citizens, it runs counter, obviously, to our efforts. And that's one of the things that I kept on reflecting on, is how could we be allowing this type of suffering to go on in the hospital when we should be trying to show the Afghan citizens that their soldiers matter. After General Caldwell returned from his battlefield circulation the next day, I was told to retract the response to Ambassador Moorfield. And I made that retraction by phone call and then later with an email.
General Caldwell had made it clear that the mission of NTMA was to build ministries and not to get wrapped around the axle about corruption. He said, that's not your lane. Your lanes are to build ministries. And the reality is, when we give resources to the Afghans, what they do with them is a matter of Afghan law. There is no treaty that gives the U.S. jurisdiction over pilfering of pharmaceuticals or anything else, or food or bullets, once they belong to the Afghans.
The gentleman yields back, and I'll recognize myself. I want to pick up Colonel Fassl and where we were before. You had made a recommendation, a formal recommendation, to bring in help, support, IG. What happened when you made that request?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I talked about previously and touched on it, the request that I made to Ambassador Moorfield went forward, and then I was told by Lieutenant General Caldwell and staff to retract it, and I did that by telephone and later by email.
What specifically did he say to you, and what was his justification for not doing this?
Prior to that, there was a meeting. In fact, there were two meetings and I don't think we talked about those, but the first meeting involved myself, Steve Anderson, Schuyler Geller, Marion Amrine, General Patton, Lieutenant General Caldwell, and that's all I can recall right now. But that meeting is where General Caldwell came in, and he was visibly upset that we had made the DOD-IG request for, and at that time, an investigation or assistance visit, an inquiry, due to the circumstances in the hospital.
Why would he be upset about that? What did he specifically say?
After that meeting, there was a shorter meeting in his office, and that was between me, obviously Lieutenant General Caldwell, Colonel Bush, his Chief of Staff, and Lieutenant Colonel Brett Sylvia, his military aide. And he was visibly upset, again, because I don't think that, and this is my conjecture, that Dr. Kim and him had a chance to talk about this situation in the hospital, okay? But his first response to me was, how could we do this or make this request with elections coming? And then he made the really, again, shocking comment that he calls me Bill.
What does that mean?
Well, I took it as that he was referring to the President of the United States.
And then he had a personal relationship.
I don't know, Chairman, if he had a personal relationship, but the political pressure there was such that he made those statements before what I would consider a three-star general or any commander that served commanding soldiers, airmen, Marines, or Coast Guard, is the welfare of the soldiers, but in this case, the welfare of the people that we were training and supplying taxpayer money and mentoring for, and that's the soldiers in that hospital. The immediate and instant care and concern, that's what I would expect. I want to go over to the hospital right now or the next morning, and I want to see what's going on over there so I can report this. That's what I was expecting, but I didn't get that.
So the consequence of this decision was to not do a full investigation, but to do something less.
Well, the consequence was that he decided that the investigation, again, he didn't have all the information at that point. This was, again, very, very early in this investigation or inspection of the hospital process. He knew some about it, but again, when Colonel Geller came to me, I immediately jumped on it as if it were a very urgent and critical situation, which it was, because there was mentors there, and they were suffering the psychological consequences. But again, General Caldwell wanted that request to go forward after he had a chance to look at it and his staff and craft another response. That's why he made me or ordered the first response to be retracted.
So you were asked to retract the request.
Yes.